Tonight, we're diving into something they definitely didn't teach you in your high school history class. The incredible women who, from the shadows, held the reins of the Wild West. I'm talking about madams, those sharp, no-nonsense businesswomen who turned what society labeled as sinful into thriving, carefully managed empires. And hey, if these kinds of stories resonate with you, I'd love it if you hit that like button or subscribed. It always amazes me to see where listeners are tuning in from. Drop your city and what time it is where you are. It genuinely blows my mind how many of you are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, get comfortable. Let yourself sink into the mattress, sofa, or blanket you're resting on. Take a long, slow breath. We're headed back to the American frontier in the 1870s. And by the time this is over, you'll feel pretty lucky to have that cozy modern bed of yours. Congratulations, you've just woken up in a cramped, dimly lit room perched above a Wild West saloon. The first thing that hits you isn't the creak of the floorboards or the clatter from below. It's the smell. Not just sweat, though there's plenty of that. No, it's more layered than that. A heady mix of wood smoke curling out of the old pot-bellied stove in the corner, cheap perfume that tries and fails to mask everything else, and the lingering sting of last night's whiskey and stale tobacco baked deep into the floorboards. You wrinkle your nose as another note drifts in. Horse manure, fresh from the street below, seeping in through thin cotton curtains barely covering the one small window in the room. Then the sounds arrive. A piano being slowly, painfully tuned somewhere downstairs, the same notes ringing out over and over, adjusting slightly each time. The clatter of wagon wheels catching on uneven dirt roads, the rhythmic crunch of hooves on packed earth. You hear voices, shouting greetings, mixing English, Spanish, and what might be German. Then a woman's laugh slices through the noise, sharp, deliberate, and practiced. You're lying on a narrow iron bed frame, and the horsehair mattress beneath you is an unforgiving nest of lumps and pokes. The wool blanket thrown over you is a faded red, once plush, now thinned to threadbare patches. There are no sheets. Those are reserved for the upscale places. And this place? This isn't one of them. Beside the bed is a chipped ceramic basin, water already gone tepid, with a sliver of harsh lye soap balancing on the edge. The room is so small, you could stretch out and touch most of it from the bed. A wobbly three-legged table stands against one wall, barely holding up an old coal oil lamp and a battered trunk stuffed with everything the room's occupant owns. The walls are paper-thin. Someone is snoring in the room next door. Hanging on a bent nail by the door is a faded calico dress, and beneath it, a pair of scuffed leather boots that have seen better days. Welcome to 1878. This is the world of a soiled dove in a mining town on the American frontier. Good news, you're not one of the working girls. Bad news, you're the madam running the place. In the rough and ruthless West of the 1870s and 1880s, being a madam was one of the only paths to financial independence for a woman. Think about it. Women couldn't vote. Most respectable jobs were off-limits. Banks wouldn't lend them money. And in many states, a woman couldn't even own property unless her name was linked to a man's. But madams? These women found the loopholes. They turned the cracks in society's rules into doorways. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, and your joints protest the motion. Running a brothel is no leisurely affair. You were up into the early hours, making sure customers behaved, watching the money flow, keeping an eye on the girls, stepping in if someone got rough, and ensuring no one was holding back on your cut. Your head throbs faintly. Last night, you allowed yourself 2 glasses of whiskey. It helps business when you drink with customers, but your head always pays the price in the morning. As you stand, your bare feet touch splintered wooden boards that haven't seen a proper cleaning in longer than you care to admit. Some of the gaps between them are wide enough to glimpse the saloon floor below. Welcome to another day in a profession most people pretend doesn't exist until they need it. The saloon floor below creaks softly as you move, and those splinters? They're not just a nuisance, they're part of your daily hazard. You reach for your worn, cotton wrapper and slip it over your chemise before stepping toward the wash basin. The water, now cold from sitting out overnight, bites at your skin as you splash it on your face. But you do it anyway. There's no mirror in here. They're too expensive, too easily broken in a place where miners and drunk cowboys stumble around on a regular basis. You know your own face by touch now, The lines forming at the corners of your eyes that weren't there 5 years ago, and the way your mouth has settled into a firmer line over time. You're 35. You've been running this place for close to 7 years now. It's not the most luxurious brothel in town, but it's not scraping the bottom either. You've got 6 girls under your roof, 3 in the rooms lining this narrow, creaky hallway, and 3 more in the outbuilding behind the saloon. Most of the madams around here started as working girls themselves. Some still take clients, especially the wealthy ones, the kind with influence or connections. But not you. You figured out early that the real profit wasn't in selling your own body. It was in taking a cut from those who did. Downstairs, you hear the bartender beginning his morning routine, the clinking of glassware, the sound of him setting up shop. It's your cue to start moving. There are supplies to order, a sheriff to pay off, and a new girl arriving on the afternoon stage who'll need orientation. You pull on a dark blue skirt and a white shirtwaist. Practical choices for the kind of errands and negotiations your day demands. Later, you'll change into something more striking. Silk, if you've got it. Velvet, if silk's not clean. Because in this line of work, appearance is part of the business model. The successful madams, women like Maddie Silks in Denver or Jenny Rogers, understood this perfectly. They used image like a weapon. Looking successful brought in better clientele, which meant higher prices and greater control. They wore extravagant gowns, draped themselves in jewelry, and made sure everyone in town could see how well they were doing. Take Maddie Silks, for example. There's a story about how she arrived in Denver in the 1870s with 4 girls she'd hired back in Kansas City. But they didn't just make a beeline to their destination. Maddie was smarter than that. She had what she called a portable boarding house set up right inside her coach. They stopped and did business at every mining camp along the way. By the time they got to Denver, they'd already earned enough to open a proper parlor in style. That's the kind of sharp thinking that separates those who survive from those who thrive. You bend to tighten your boots, wincing as the laces press against a sore blister from yesterday. Comfortable shoes don't exist in your profession. The delicate boots with their pointed toes and 2-inch heels are murder on your feet, but they're part of the uniform. At least you don't have to lace into the corset yet. That particular torment can wait until the sun goes down. As you finish dressing, your mind turns to numbers. Last night was a good night. Payday at the mines always brings in free-spending men. You handle the books yourself. You don't trust anyone else with the real figures. Hidden beneath a false bottom in your desk drawer is a leather-bound ledger filled with meticulous notes on every transaction. The other ledger, the one you keep on top, in plain sight, is just for show. Its totals sanitized for the eyes of any lawman who might come sniffing around. A successful madam had to be as sharp with numbers as she was with negotiation. Jenny Rogers, queen of the row in Denver, turned her earnings into long-term investments, pouring her money into the city's irrigation and reservoir systems and collecting dividends as the town grew. Maddie Silks bought up plots of real estate across Denver. By the time she stepped away from the business, she owned half a block of prime downtown property. The economics worked like this. A girl might charge $5 for her company. That same $5 covered her room and board in your establishment. Everything beyond that, what she earned with charm or hustle, could go toward dresses, medicine, or savings. Of course, not all madams were fair. If a girl didn't meet a quota, she could find herself out on the street. Business was business. You weren't quite so ruthless. You knew bad nights happen, sickness happens. But you did take 50% of what the girls made. In return, you provided a roof, food, some protection, and steady clientele. And then there was the alcohol, always the alcohol. Watered down and sold at a 60% markup. That's where the real profit came in. Get the men drinking. Get them to buy drinks for the girls. Drinks that were often just colored water. The money rolled in either way. Some girls earned a commission on every drink sold, but that cash often found its way back into your hands to cover costumes, corsets, cosmetics, and all the glitter that sold the illusion. You descend the narrow staircase, every creak underfoot announcing your presence. It's still early. The saloon is quiet. The bartender, Thomas, is already at work, wiping down the bar with a rag that looks like it survived a few wars. He nods respectfully. "Morning, Miss Catherine," he says, using the name you've gone by in business for years. Your real name hasn't passed your lips in a long time. Most madams operated under false names. It was safer that way. "Morning, Thomas. Any trouble after I turned in?" you ask, casting your eyes across the room. looking for overturned chairs or cracked glasses. Nothing serious. Had to walk Mr. Wilson home again. Can't handle his liquor. You nod, making a mental note. Mr. Wilson might need a reminder from his wife, though of course you'd never say such a thing aloud. Discretion is the foundation of your entire business model. Still, it's wise to keep a quiet tally of which customers are starting to become liabilities. The saloon looks as expected. The bar runs long along one wall, the wood dark and scarred from decades of bottles, glasses, and the occasional knife. A dozen mismatched tables dot the floor, surrounded by chairs that don't match but still hold weight. A low stage anchors the back wall, just big enough for a piano player and maybe a singer if you can find one who won't rob you blind. The walls are cluttered with faded prints of racehorses and hunting scenes, pages torn from magazines back east. Behind the bar, a large cracked mirror stretches across the wall, giving the illusion of space and light. It's no house of mirrors like Jenny Rogers ran in Denver with its velvet furnishings and wall-to-wall looking glasses, but it serves its purpose. After all, the men don't come here for the decor. Then, a knock at the back door pulls you from your thoughts. Too early for customers. Must be the weekly supply wagon with whiskey and beer. I'll get it, you tell Thomas, heading for the storeroom. But when you swing the door open, it's not the delivery. It's Sheriff Mills, and the grim look under his bushy mustache makes your stomach tighten. This can't be good. At least he's polite. He removes his hat. "Morning, Catherine," he says. "Sheriff," you reply. "What brings you by so early? Our usual arrangement isn't due until Friday." The sheriff usually found more pressing matters to occupy his time than raiding your establishment. But this morning, it wasn't about your usual arrangement. "There's been some trouble over at Lily's place," he said. You already felt it in your gut. Lily had been running a smaller brothel at the edge of town, catering mostly to the miners, men who couldn't afford your prices but still sought comfort in the same kind of company. "What kind of trouble?" you asked, though part of you already knew. "She's dead," he said plainly. "And one of her girls, too. Stabbed." A cold shiver rippled through you, despite the warmth rising with the morning sun. The dangers of this business were nothing new, but murder, violent, intimate, final, was rare, even in a town as rough as this. "Any idea who did it?" He shook his head. "Working on it. No leads yet. Just figured you ought to know. Best be a little more careful for a while." You nodded, though your thoughts were already sprinting ahead. You'd need to bring in another hired man for security. Give the girls a firm warning to stay vigilant. Might have to raise prices a bit too, just to offset the added expense. "Thanks for the heads up," you said, reaching into your pocket and pulling out a silver dollar. Not quite a bribe, more like a gratuity for the warning. He accepted it with a nod, slipped it into his coat without a word, and placed his hat back on his head. "Take care, Catherine," he said, and then he was gone. You stood in the doorway for a moment longer, letting the weight of it settle. Lily, dead. You hadn't known her well. Rivalry keeps a distance between women in your trade, but she'd been around a long time. Reliable, constant, a fixture, like you. Now she was gone, and it hit you with clarity. All your planning, all your bookkeeping, all your discretion and diplomacy, it didn't make you safe. You were still just a madam in a town that needed you but didn't truly want you. You were tolerated, until you weren't. And if you disappeared, there wouldn't be a single tear shed. That was the hard truth. One that women like Maddie Silks and Jenny Rogers lived with every day. They had built entire empires out of want, out of loneliness, out of need. They amassed fortunes in towns where women couldn't even open bank accounts. But they did it from the edge, always a single bad night, a jealous rival, or one town-wide moral panic away from ruin. And yet, they didn't stop. They expanded. They forged alliances. They greased the right palms. Maddie Silks even managed to get a liquor license in 1885, an unthinkable feat for a woman back then. They knew how to legitimize their trade, at least enough to stay standing. You pushed off the doorframe and walked back inside. No time to drown in what-ifs. The ledger was waiting. At your corner desk, you reviewed last night's receipts. The numbers were solid. 1 or 2 more months like this, and you could finally afford to replace that cracked upstairs window. Maybe even splurge on that new piano you'd been watching in the shop window. Music brought in customers, and customers meant money. Running a brothel in the Wild West wasn't complicated, but it required relentless precision. Alcohol brought in steady profit. The private services brought in the big bills, though those were less predictable. Room rentals varied, some by the hour, others for the night, priced to match the weight of a man's coin purse. Everything had a price, and that price wasn't negotiable. But as your pen scratched through the columns, your mind drifted. Lily's death was a jarring reminder how quickly things could unravel. You've been saving for years now, quietly and consistently. The goal? A little plot of land. Somewhere off the map. Somewhere no one would whisper behind their hands if they saw you buying bread. Most madams dreamed of retiring before their age caught up with them. Most never made it. Take Pearl de Vere, for instance. She kept her house running well into her 30s, throwing lavish parties and charging outrageous fees for her company. In 1897, she died from a morphine overdose after one such night. Jenny Rogers held onto her empire longer, but even she couldn't escape the toll it took. The late nights, the stress, the loneliness, it eventually drained her, body and soul. The front door creaked open and a beam of sunlight poured in. Suddy stepped through, carrying a basket of fresh bread from the bakery. The scent hit you instantly, warm, rich, soft. Yeast and flour pushing back against the stale bite of beer and tobacco that clung to the walls. Morning. She called out with that boundless energy that made her seem younger than her 22 years. Morning, you answered, as she set the basket on the bar and started unpacking the loaves. Mrs. Peterson at the bakery says her husband's thinking about running for mayor, she said as she worked. And the Marshall boys got into another fight at the Silver Dollar. Broke a table this time. Oh, and the stage is delayed. Will trouble outside Carson City. You nodded. More time before the new girl arrived. That might actually be for the best. You like to prepare. Suddy kept talking as she arranged the bread, her words a stream of town gossip gathered during her morning errand. And you let her speak. In a town like this, what your girls overheard was a form of currency, intel that helped you read the temperature of the street better than any lawman or mayor ever could. Your focus shifted back to the to-do list building in your mind. There was still plenty on today's docket, the new girl's arrival and orientation. The shipment of proper French champagne was supposed to come in for your higher-end customers. And the doctor's monthly visit needed arranging. Not every madam bothered with health checks, but you did. You insisted. Running this place wasn't just about profit. It was about management of bodies, emotions, egos, and expectations. You were a businesswoman, yes, but also a mother figure, a mediator, a protector. You broke up arguments, soothed fevers, intercepted fists, and somehow, you still managed to smile while you did it, because smiling helped keep the dollars flowing. Still, no matter how essential you were to the town's unseen machinery, your work remained invisible. The same people who entered your doors after sundown would cross the street to avoid you by morning. The men who profited from your investments would never so much as nod if their wives were watching. You lived in the gaps, needed but never acknowledged. Yet for all that, madams were often the wealthiest and most powerful women in their towns. They owned land when most women couldn't legally do so. They built businesses when others were stuck folding laundry. They forged wealth when most women had no access to capital or independence. The morning pushed forward. The saloon began to stir. Your piano player shuffled in, his clothes rumpled from whatever floor he'd crashed on. The girls began emerging, some alert and composed, others still dragging the weight of last night's drinks or company. Thomas sliced the fresh loaves in the kitchen, getting ready for the midday meal. Bread, cheese, and stew if the week had been generous. You stretched in your chair, feeling the tightness in your shoulders ease. The walls, thin as ever, let in the warmth of the morning sun, and the old wooden seat beneath you felt just a touch more forgiving. There was still a long day ahead, but for a moment, you allowed yourself to pause, to breathe. The rhythm of the day began to hum around you. You heard the soft swish of a broom sweeping the upstairs hallway, smelled the coffee beginning to brew in the back. The scent of fresh bread mingled with it, warm and grounding. Your muscles began to release, one by one. Your breath slowed, deepened. In that rare, golden moment of stillness, you let yourself notice the dust motes spinning in a single shaft of sunlight pouring in through the front window. And just like that, for the briefest pause, you felt at ease, softened by the stillness, even as the world around you quietly prepared to move again. The spot where the sheriff had been standing moments ago still felt heavy with tension when the brief silence shattered, literally. A crash of glass upstairs followed by sharp cursing snapped you out of your stillness. You sighed, already knowing the drill. Life as a madam rarely allowed long stretches of peace. I'll handle it, you told Thomas, who was already looking up at the ceiling with concern. The stairs groaned beneath your boots as you made your way to the second floor. The noise had come from Rose's room. She was one of your newer girls, barely 20, and possessed of a temper that rose fast and hot. Everything all right in there? You called through the thin door. Fine, came the sharp response, just before another crash echoed inside. You didn't bother knocking. As madam, every room in this house was yours to enter whenever needed. You pushed the door open and stepped into a scene of chaos. Rose stood in the middle of her room, fragments of what had been a porcelain wash basin scattered at her feet. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing with either fury or grief, or both. Want to tell me what that was about? You asked calmly, keeping your tone as neutral as possible. In this line of work, judgment only poured salt on open wounds. Johnny Wilson, she said, voice cracking. He promised to take me away. Said he was saving up to buy us a little place outside of town. This morning, I saw him at the stagecoach office with Martha from the millinery shop. Bags packed. Both of T you'd heard this story before. Different names, different towns, but always the same end. A man fills a girl's head with talk of rescue and respectability. Then one day he's gone. Sometimes without a word. Sometimes bold enough to return on payday, acting like the promises never happened. That basin's coming out of your earnings, you said, because business is business, but you softened the edge in your voice. Get cleaned up and come downstairs. There's breakfast waiting. And I think I've got a green silk dress that would suit you. That color would look good with your hair. It wasn't much. But in this world, the small kindnesses were often the only ones available. Rose nodded, brushing away a tear with the back of her hand. Back downstairs, more of your girls had started emerging. Lucy, your oldest at 29, was helping Thomas slice the fresh bread. Mary and Beth, the sisters who'd come west after their parents died in a factory fire, were sweeping the floor and straightening chairs. Everyone had a job. That was how a well-run brothel functioned. Not just a place of pleasure, but a household of order. The better houses always were. Some madams even insisted their girls be taught to read, to speak properly, to know the news of the day. The more refined the girl, the higher the price. Jenny Rogers was known for it. She selected only the most beautiful, best-mannered young women for her house of mirrors. She dressed them in silks, housed them in splendor, and charged a premium for the illusion. Your place wasn't that grand, but you had your standards. No girl worked if she was sick or injured. Everyone got regular medical exams. You didn't allow excessive drinking during work hours. And you kept a close watch on customers who gave off the wrong energy. Not all madams were that careful. But you learned early. Healthy, protected, and content girls meant better business. A knock at the front door pulled your thoughts away. Too early for customers. I'll get it, Lucy said, wiping her hands on her apron and crossing to answer it. She returned moments later, followed by a young woman who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her dress, once expensive, was wrinkled and road-stained. She clutched a small carpet bag with trembling fingers. She's looking for work, Lucy said quietly, eyeing the girl up and down. I'm Catherine, you said, offering your hand. I run this place. Emily, she replied in a voice so faint you had to lean in to catch it. Emily Mitchell. Her handshake was uncertain, her movements hesitant. Well, Emily Mitchell, you said, studying her pale, exhausted face. You look like you could use a hot meal and a chance to wash up before we talk further. Lucy, show her to the back room. Find her something clean to wear. As Lucy led her away, you watched them disappear around the corner and wondered about her story. Most girls didn't arrive at your door as their first choice. They came because of desperation, necessity, or the lack of any other path. Some were widows. Some were abandoned. Others ran from homes that had hurt them. A few had been born into the trade, brought in by mothers or sisters who knew no other life. On the American frontier, options for women were few. They could marry, teach school if they were educated, work as maids or laundresses for miserable wages, or they could enter the sporting life. For a woman alone, with no family or money, there often wasn't much of a choice to begin with. About an hour later, Emily sat across from you at one of the saloon tables, wrapped in a borrowed dress of Lucy's that hung awkwardly on her slight frame. She had devoured a bowl of stew and half a loaf of bread like someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. Color had returned to her cheeks. You poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. Tell me what brings you here. Her story came out haltingly, like a wagon struggling up a steep hill. She had been a governess for a wealthy family in San Francisco. The master of the house made advances. When she refused, he accused her of stealing a silver hairbrush. His wife believed him. Emily fled before the police could be summoned, with only what she could carry and the little money she'd managed to save. I tried to find proper work, she said, staring down into her cup. But without references, you nodded. It was a tale you'd heard more than once. The world wasn't kind of women who had no name to vouch for them. Have you ever done this kind of work before? You asked. No reason to dance around the question. She shook her head. A flush crept up her neck. No, ma'am. Then why come here? This isn't a boarding house. She lifted her gaze to meet yours. And behind the desperation, you saw something else steal. Because I heard you run a clean place. That you treat your girls fairly. And because I've got nowhere else to go. You studied her for a long moment. Taking on a green girl meant time and effort. It meant coaching her through awkward first encounters, guiding her through the shock of reality. It could mean drama when the fantasy gave way to fact. But something about her steadiness, about her dignity, even in this moment, made you pause. We'll try a week, you said. You'll start with cleaning and serving drinks. If that goes well, we'll talk about the rest. Lucy would train her. She'd get room and board, plus 10% of whatever she earned. If she stayed a month, the cut would rise to 20. It was better than most madams offered, but still business. Not charity. Emily nodded, and you could see the relief in her entire posture. Thank you, she said softly. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't, you replied, rising from your seat. Lucy would show Emily where she'd be sleeping. As they disappeared up the stairs, Thomas approached with a folded piece of paper in his hand. Message came while you were talking, he said, handing it to you. The note was brief, written in the elegant, looping script of Madame Rosalie, the woman who ran the most luxurious brothel in town. She was summoning the madams to a private meeting at her establishment that evening. It wasn't a common occurrence, but given what had happened to Lily, it wasn't exactly surprising either. Though competitors by trade, the madams of a town often maintained a delicate, mutually beneficial alliance. They coordinated pricing to avoid undercutting one another. They warned each other about dangerous or violent customers. Sometimes, they even pooled resources to bribe officials or hire shared protection. Like any savvy businesswomen, they knew that limited cooperation could serve the collective good. Even the legendary madams of Denver, Maddie Silks, Jenny Rogers, and their peers understood when to set rivalry aside. When Denver's city council once tried to publicly shame them by mandating that all prostitutes wear yellow ribbons, they flipped the humiliation into defiance, dressing themselves entirely in bright yellow from head to toe. The resulting spectacle was so flamboyant that the ordinance was quickly repealed. You folded the note and tucked it into your pocket. Attending the meeting meant stepping away from your saloon during business hours, not ideal, but necessary. You'd have Thomas oversee things while you were gone. The day wore on with its usual rhythm. You went over the supply inventory with Thomas, jotting down what needed to be reordered. You settled a spat between Mary and Beth that had escalated from a borrowed hairpin to accusations about stealing a customer. You reviewed the books again, considering whether it was time to raise your prices. The new mining operation north of town had brought in workers, men with fresh wages and the desire to spend them. By late afternoon, the saloon was ready. The floors had been swept clean. The spittoons emptied and scrubbed. The bar fully stocked. Fresh sawdust scattered across the floor to catch spills and ease cleanup the next day. The piano had been tuned as well as your regular player could manage. Upstairs, the girls were transforming from their daytime selves into the personas they'd wear tonight. Corsets were tightened, hair curled and pinned, rouge dabbed onto cheeks, powder brushed over tired skin to mask signs of fatigue. You retreated to your own quarters to prepare. Gone were the businesslike skirt and shirtwaist. In their place, you stepped into a deep burgundy satin gown. It wasn't the latest style, but it still held elegance. Around your neck hung a gold locket, an old gift from a customer who had more cash than common sense. Your hair, streaked now with gray, was swept up into a style that suggested maturity and poise rather than an attempt at youth. But it wasn't just a change of clothes. It was a shift in role. The moment the gown settled on your shoulders, you felt yourself becoming the version of you the customers expected, composed, worldly, a little aloof, but approachable in just the right way. Being a madam was performance as much as it was management. By the time you returned to the saloon floor, the first patrons had already begun to trickle in. Miners mostly, still wearing the day's grime despite attempts to wash it away. They ordered whiskey, their eyes scanning the room as they settled into familiar rhythms. The girls had arranged themselves with subtle calculation, each choosing their spot, their posture, their smile. You made your rounds as always, greeting the regulars by name, introducing yourself to any fresh faces. You kept your tone warm, but never familiar. You laughed politely, but kept a respectable distance. That fine balance, welcoming but dignified, was what kept the money flowing and the boundaries intact. The night unfolded much like others. Whiskey poured steadily. The piano player launched into a mix of upbeat tunes, occasionally accompanied by Rose's surprisingly sweet singing voice, when she wasn't smashing porcelain in her room. Men paid for dances, and some of those dances led upstairs, quiet negotiations giving way to private arrangements. You moved through the saloon with practiced awareness, stepping in only when needed to keep things in check. At 9 o'clock, you caught Lucy's eye and gave her a subtle nod. She understood immediately. You were leaving for the meeting. She'd be in charge while you were gone. Lucy had been with you the longest. She knew the place nearly as well as you did. If the time ever came for you to leave this life behind, she'd be the one you'd trust to take it over. Stepping outside, the night air was a welcome relief from the thick warmth and smoke inside. The streets were quieter now. Most respectable businesses had shut their doors. Here and there, a few men lingered near other saloons. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Madame Rosalie's house sat at the north edge of town, a stately two-story painted white, with green shutters and the architectural grace of something more genteel. Only the discreet red lantern beside the door hinted at what really went on inside. You were greeted by a doorman dressed like a proper butler, who led you through to the back parlor. The room was richly appointed, velvet couches, oriental rugs, gilt-framed paintings. On a sideboard sat crystal decanters filled with dark amber liquor and polished glasses arranged like jewelry. 3 other women were already there. Madame Rosalie herself, who claimed to be French, though no one had ever proven it, wore a midnight blue silk gown and carried herself with the regal bearing of a stage actress. Harriet Brown was next. She ran a small but well-regarded house catering exclusively to the town's Chinese laborers. And finally Sarah Jenkins, whose brothel sat at the opposite edge of town from yours, served mostly the cowboys and cattle hands passing through. Polite greetings were exchanged. Drinks poured. It was only after everyone had settled that Madame Rosalie addressed the room. "I assume you've all heard about Lily," she said, her accent thickening in concern. Everyone nodded. Word had traveled fast, as it always did in small towns. "The sheriff has no suspects," Sarah added. "I spoke to him this afternoon." "We need to take precautions," Rosalie continued. "We should consider extra security. Maybe closing a bit earlier for a while. Raise prices to offset the risk." "Smart," Harriet said. "More risk, more cost. Customers may complain, but they'll still pay." The conversation continued, measured, pragmatic. Talk of business, of risk management. No one gave voice to the fear that hung between the words, that what happened to Lily could just as easily happen to any one of them. Despite the influence they had built, the wealth they had gathered, madams lived in a fragile space. They operated without the protection of the law, yet were subject to its scrutiny. They were vital to the economy of their towns, yet were excluded from its respect. They were powerhouses in a society that claimed women had no place in business. Many, like Jenny Rogers and Mattie Silks, tried to earn respectability through generosity. They donated to churches, sponsored orphanages, paid for school books, bought clothing for the poor, contributed to civic improvements. But public acceptance remained out of reach. The money was welcome. The women behind it were not. The money might have been welcomed, but the women behind it never were. The meeting ended with practical agreements. New security measures would be taken, and a quiet pact was made among the madams to share information on any suspicious men passing through town. As you gathered your things, preparing to leave, Madame Rosalie drifted closer. "Catherine, a word," she said softly, steering you toward a quiet corner of the richly appointed parlor. "What is it?" you asked, noticing the worry flickering in her usually unreadable eyes. "I heard a rumor," she began, her voice low, "that Lily had been keeping a book. Names, dates, special requests. The kind of details that could ruin a man's reputation." A chill passed through you that had nothing to do with the evening air. "You think that's why she was killed?" Rosalie shrugged with the elegance of someone who'd survived too long to speak in absolutes. "I think it would be wise for all of us to be cautious about what we know, and about who knows that we know it." Her warning set heavy in your chest as you stepped back into the quiet streets and made your way toward your own saloon. You walked with purpose, but your mind kept turning. It was no secret that madams often accumulated information more valuable than gold. Jenny Rogers had once blackmailed a local politician, threatening to reveal him as a frequent visitor. She'd made $17,000 from that one secret, a staggering sum at the time. But leverage like that came with danger. Knowledge could build power, yes, but it could also invite knives in the dark. When you finally returned, the saloon was still lively, but the crowd had thinned. From behind the bar, Thomas gave a subtle shake of the head to let you know nothing had gone wrong during your absence. You did a slow round through the room, checking on your girls, reading the temperature of the clientele. Everything looked smooth. Emily was still on her feet, moving between tables with a practiced rhythm, her earlier nervousness replaced by cautious confidence. You watched her from across the room. She was learning to walk the line, available, but not too available. Friendly, but not open. She might do well, if she could hold that balance. As midnight crept closer, the pace of the evening slowed. A few customers headed upstairs with the girls. Others made their way home, or stumbled off to the miners' barracks. A handful of regulars lingered at the bar, nursing drinks and spinning stories that got taller with every sip. You settled into your desk, one eye still on the room, while you quietly tallied the night's earnings. The meeting with the other madams had left a weight on your thoughts. You couldn't help but reflect on your own future, on how easily everything could change. Most madams didn't get happy endings. Maddie Silks, for all her success, fell for a man named Cortez Thompson who used her and lived off her earnings. Pearl de Verre, glamorous, wealthy, admired, died of a morphine overdose in her 30s. Others fell to drink, disease, or violence. Few of them turned financial power into the social acceptance they craved. You, though, you'd been more fortunate. You'd saved, invested carefully, avoided the vices that dragged others down. You weren't rich, but you'd built enough of a cushion that retirement was a possibility. A small house, a garden, books, quiet, a life where no one cared who you used to be. You let yourself drift into that thought for a moment. Your pen paused above the ledger. The idea of freedom lingered long enough to soften your shoulders. You rolled your neck, sighing as it popped gently with release. From the piano came a soft, unhurried melody. Your player had moved on from dance tunes to something gentler, more appropriate for the hour. The slow rhythm echoed your breath, which had unconsciously deepened and slowed. Your body felt heavy in your chair, your feet grateful for the rest. Around you, the saloon eased into its quiet rhythm. Muted conversation, glass against wood, a short burst of laughter. The gentle scratch of your pen across the ledger offered a different kind of pleasure. The order of neat columns, the sense of control over a chaotic life. You yawned, raising your arms in a stretch. The burgundy satin of your gown whispered as you shifted, the weight of the fabric settling differently as your muscles relaxed. You adjusted your position, found a more comfortable angle, and let yourself breathe a little deeper. The night was nearly over. Most of your girls were upstairs now, either with customers or finally at rest. Tomorrow, you'd need to keep helping Emily find her footing. Another layer of responsibility. Another day of quiet vigilance. The piano notes softened again, now resembling the gentle patter of rainfall on tin. The kind of sound that settled behind your thoughts, becoming a rhythm rather than a distraction. And then it was morning again, too soon. A sliver of sunlight pierced the thin curtains in your room, landing directly across your face. You groaned and rolled away, dragging the blanket with you. Your head pulsed, not from drink, you were far too disciplined for that, but from the late hour at which you'd finally collapsed. The mattress creaked as you sat up, joints protesting every movement. People often imagined madams as ladies of leisure, but the truth was far more physical. You were constantly in motion, supervising the floor, intervening in disputes, checking on the girls, managing books, smoothing egos. Your bare feet hit the cold floorboards. You crossed to the basin and splashed your face with last night's leftover water, now icy from sitting. The jolt helped clear the fog. Outside, the town was already beginning its own routine. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the clatter of wagon wheels, a vendor calling out about fresh milk. You dressed quickly in a navy skirt and crisp white blouse, practical clothes for the day's work. Your hair was twisted into a knot at your neck, a hint of rosewater behind your ears. Clean, not flashy, daytime appropriate. Downstairs, you found Thomas already cleaning up the remnants of the previous night. The sawdust swept into piles, glasses washed and turned upside down to dry. Lucy stood over the stove in the small kitchen, stirring a pot that gave off the comforting scent of oatmeal. "Morning," she said, eyes still on her task. "Coffee's ready." You poured a cup, savoring its bitter heat. No matter how tight things ever got, you'd always insisted on good coffee. It was a small pleasure, but in a life like this, those mattered. "How's our new girl?" You asked, leaning in the doorway. Lucy shrugged. Still sleeping. She worked hard last night. Quick learner. Good. When she wakes up, send her to me. I want to go over the rules again. Every madam had rules. They weren't just about business. They were about survival. Don't go upstairs with a man who's too drunk. Don't leave the premises without approval. No stealing from clients, or from one another. No fighting under this roof. Ever. Jenny Rogers, famously strict at her house of mirrors, had her own code. Her girls weren't allowed to drink excessively, had to dress and speak a certain way, and were expected to handle even the most difficult customers with grace. Violation meant immediate dismissal, no wages, no second chances. It might have seemed cruel, but a brothel's reputation rested not just on its luxury, but on the conduct of its women. A house full of drunk, sloppy, combative girls wouldn't attract quality customers. And without quality customers, the whole system unraveled. The high-paying customers were what made the entire business model sustainable, sometimes even lucrative. You were only halfway through your morning coffee when a sharp knock echoed at the front door. Thomas glanced at you with a questioning look. You set down your cup and rose. "I'll get it," you said. When you opened the door, a young man stood there, crisp deputy's uniform, hat in hand, badge still shiny like he hadn't worn it long. "Ma'am," he greeted politely, touching the brim of his hat. "Sheriff sent me to update you on the situation with Lily." You stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. "Any news? Did they catch who did it?" The young deputy shifted awkwardly, clearly uneasy standing in your saloon even though it was empty. A drummer, passing through town. He had blood on his clothes, and Lily's brooch in his pocket. "Did he say why?" you asked, though part of you already expected the answer. "He said," she laughed at him, "when he couldn't perform." You nodded slowly, unsurprised. You'd seen enough in your years to know that a bruised male ego could be dangerous, lethal even. You'd seen men lash out over far less. "The sheriff wanted all you ladies to know it's handled," the deputy added, his discomfort increasing. "No need for added worry. Please thank the sheriff for the information." You replied, your tone formal but polite. "Will there be a trial?" The young man shifted again, eyes darting briefly to the floor. "No, ma'am. He, tried to escape custody this morning. The sheriff had to shoot, which meant, of course, that the sheriff or one of his deputies had ended it swiftly. No trial, no court costs, no spectacle, just one more dead man, and one less problem, for a town that had little patience for justice when the victim was a prostitute. You weren't shocked. In the justice system of the frontier, not all lives were weighed equally. After the deputy left, you shared the news with Lucy and Thomas. A quiet silence followed, each of you taking in the implications. Finally, Lucy spoke. "Should I tell the girls when they wake up?" You nodded. "Yes, but keep it simple. Just let them know the man responsible is dead. No need for the details. They'll only cause distress." The morning resumed its usual rhythm. One by one, the girls emerged from their rooms, some alone, some followed by customers from the night before who slipped out sheepishly through the back. The air filled with the familiar clamor of women living in tight quarters. Complaints about borrowed clothing not returned, debates over breakfast duties, whispered gossip about clients and each other. Emily came down last. The borrowed dress she wore was rumpled from sleep, but she looked better, less anxious, more grounded. She spotted you across the room and walked over. "Madam Catherine," she said formally, her tone respectful. "Lucy said you wanted to see me." "Yes," you said, motioning toward a table tucked into a corner, away from the chatter. "Have a seat." She obeyed without hesitation, folding her hands neatly in her lap. The posture gave away her former life, shoulders squared, spine straight. A governess training never quite left the body. "You did well last night," you began. "Thomas said you were quick and careful. No spills, no missed orders." "Thank you," she said softly, the praise bringing a small blush to her cheeks. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." You gave her a nod. "Today, we need to talk about what comes next. Serving drinks is a good start, but it won't bring in much. The majority of our earnings come from other services." Her blush deepened, but she didn't look away. "I understand." "Do you?" you asked gently. "Because once you take that step, it's not easy to walk back. There are no second chances in this line of work, Emily, not from society, anyway. Many girls begin thinking it's temporary. A few months, save some money, then leave. But most never make it out. The stigma follows you, especially in small towns. Emily lowered her eyes to her hands. Her voice was quiet, but steady. What are my alternatives? You paused, then offered what little truth there was to give. You could try for work as a maid or laundress. It's harder work and pays poorly, but it's respectable. She looked up again, and the defiance in her eyes had returned. And who would hire me now, after I've spent a night under your roof? You didn't insult her with false optimism. Probably no one. Not in this town. You'd have to leave. Start somewhere else. She gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. I have exactly 23 cents to my name. Not even enough for a coach ticket, let alone starting over. It was the reality faced by so many women. Without money or support, the road between survival and ruin was short and often irreversible. I know what I'm choosing, Emily said finally, her voice stronger now. I thought about it all night. There's no other way forward for me. You nodded once, acknowledging her clarity. All right, Lucy will help you get ready. You'll need evening clothes. I'll advance you enough for a proper dress and shoes. It'll come out of your first earnings. Of course, she said. As she stood to leave, you added one more thing. Whatever brought you here, whatever you do while you're here, don't be ashamed. We offer a servicemen seek out. There's no shame in meeting demand, no matter what the church ladies think. It was the same thing Maddie Silks was said to have told every new girl under her roof. Pride was your armor. Without it, the weight of judgment could break even the strongest woman. Emily gave a small, thoughtful smile. Yes, ma'am. As she walked off to find Lucy, you watched her go, wondering how long she would last. Some girls adjusted quickly. They found the life easier than scrubbing laundry or being barked at in someone else's kitchen. Others couldn't stomach it, turning to liquor or laudanum just to get through a night, until they became too erratic, too worn, too broken to stay in a reputable house. Those girls ended up in the cribs, or dead. You hoped Emily would land on the right side of that line. You hoped she'd be one of the smart ones, the ones who, like Maddie Silks or Jenny Rogers, used what they had to build something lasting. But you'd been in the business long enough to know hope wasn't enough. The day continued, full of the usual hum of work and small conflicts. Rose was still sulking over Johnny Wilson, though at least she'd stopped breaking dishes. Mary and Beth had made peace after the hairpin argument, and were now united in loudly criticizing another girl's choice of gown. Thomas informed you that the whiskey supply was low. You'd need to place an order by midday. Then Dr. Harrison arrived. He made his monthly rounds without fanfare, as he always did. Older now, with more silver than black in his hair, and a permanent sternness to his expression. But he softened, just slightly, when addressing you. Catherine, he greeted. The usual examinations? Yes, you replied. And we've got a new girl who'll need checking as well. You led him to the back room that doubled as your office, and, on days like this, as the clinic. Dr. Harrison was a rarity. Most frontier physicians avoided brothels unless called for emergencies, and they charged extra when they did. But Harrison understood that diseases didn't observe class or respectability. Infections passed from your girls to respectable wives through the men who moved between both worlds. His monthly visits were as much for the town's protection as they were for your girl's well-being. The examinations were short but methodical. Each girl was checked for signs of venereal disease. Any infection would mean she couldn't work until treatment and clearance. Other concerns were addressed as well. Lingering coughs that might point to tuberculosis, abnormal bleeding, early signs of pregnancy. When it was Emily's turn, you noticed the hesitation in her steps as she approached your office. This was often the moment when new girls questioned their decision, when the cold, clinical reality of the profession truly settled in. It's necessary, you told her gently, for your safety and ours. The doctor, as always, was discreet and professional. Emily nodded, then walked in, her back as straight as a ruler. 15 minutes later, she emerged. Her cheeks were flushed, but her composure was intact. All clear, Dr. Harrison reported. Remarkably healthy. No signs of prior activity, as she claimed. You paid him in full, a rate higher than what he charged for respectable households, but fair considering the social risk to his reputation. You walked him out the back door. It wouldn't do for his regular patients to see him coming out of your establishment, even in a professional capacity. As the afternoon edged closer to evening, the pace inside the saloon began to pick up. Girls who had spent the day mending clothes or writing letters, always filled with fictional stories about their employment, shifted their focus to getting ready for the night. Thomas stocked the bar and made sure the spittoons were emptied and scrubbed. The piano player arrived, less disheveled than usual, and began warming up with a few tentative scales. You went upstairs to change. Tonight, it was the green velvet gown, slightly dated, but still elegant. Its fitted bodice and flowing skirt did their job. You selected a different set of jewelry. Pearl earrings, payment from a customer who'd run short on cash. Your hair was styled more elaborately this time, with combs that held the graying strands in a shape that spoke of maturity, not desperation. When you descended the stairs again, the transformation had extended to others. Emily stood near the base, completely changed. Lucy had found her a dress of pale blue silk, fraying slightly at the seams, but still charming. Her hair was curled and pinned, with delicate tendrils framing her face. A hint of rouge colored her cheeks and lips, just enough to catch the low evening light. "Well?" she asked, turning slowly for your inspection. "Well, I do." "You'll do," you said with a small nod, noting with satisfaction that Lucy had chosen both the right color and the right cut to complement her frame and complexion. That's what mattered in this business, presentation. As evening settled and the first customers arrived, you watched Emily closely. It would be her first night offering more than just drinks, and the experience would shape her place in the house. She was nervous but composed, laughing at the right moments, accepting drinks with grace, though you noticed she barely touched them. Smart girl, stay sociable, stay clear-headed. You saw her dance clumsily with a few men, letting them lead, keeping the smile on her face, never too warm, never too cold. Around 9, she was deep in conversation with a middle-aged man who looked like a minor clerk or mid-level businessman. Not wealthy, but presentable, sober, clean, a reasonable first client. A few minutes passed, then both glanced in your direction. You gave the faintest nod. Emily led him upstairs. That was how things worked in a respectable house. No loud negotiations, no vulgar displays. Everyone knew the prices, and if they didn't, they were informed quietly. Approval was always given before heading up. It kept a thin veil of gentility in place, one that separated houses like yours from the cribs in the alleyways. She came back down about 45 minutes later. Her expression was unreadable but steady. She walked to the desk where you kept the night's accounts, handed over several bills. You counted, recorded, and handed back her cut. "All right?" you asked under your breath. She gave a small nod, her lips lifting just slightly. "Fine." He was polite. "Good. Take a short break, then back to the floor." The evening moved forward. Your regulars were in good spirits. News had spread about a new silver vein found in the northern mine. That meant more work, more wages, and more men looking to spend them. The piano player found his stride, fingers skipping lightly across the keys. Even Rose, recently heartbroken, was laughing again, surrounded by cowboys who had rolled in from a nearby cattle drive. But near midnight, a disturbance broke through the pleasant rhythm. A loud crash at the front door jolted your attention. A group of trail-dusted men strode inside, voices booming, laughter hard and sharp. You recognized the type immediately. They'd been drinking elsewhere and came looking for something rougher than liquor. Their leader was tall, scruffy, with a week's worth of beard and a long scar etched across his jaw. His eyes swept the room with predatory calculation. You moved toward them, smile fixed but alert. Behind the bar, Thomas tracked your movement. "Gentlemen," you greeted, placing yourself just far enough away to avoid grabbing distance, but close enough to show respect. "Welcome to the Silver Star. What can we do for you tonight?" "Whiskey," the scarred man grunted. "And girls, been on the trail 2 weeks." "Of course," you said smoothly. "Thomas will see to the drinks. The girls will join you when they're free." Most of your women were already busy with customers. Only Emily and Sarah were unoccupied. The newcomers noticed and didn't look thrilled about the wait. They settled at a table and ordered the cheapest bottle on the shelf. The tension was immediate, their volume rising, their laughter more aggressive than amused. You kept your eye on them. Sarah approached first, offering her usual smile. As she leaned in, the scarred man reached out and pulled her abruptly onto his lap. She kept smiling, but her eyes flickered toward you, a silent request. "What's your name, girl?" he asked, his voice carrying. Sarah, she replied, adjusting her posture to keep some space between them. Sarah, he repeated, taking a long drink. You look like a girl I knew back in Abilene. She wasn't friendly enough. Hope you're friendlier. The threat hung in the air. Thomas stepped out from behind the bar, moving toward the table with deliberate casualness. Your regulars took notice. Some started inching toward the exit. Sarah kept her composure. Why don't I show you just how friendly I can be, she said brightly, standing and offering him her hand. It was a smart move, an attempt to redirect the situation upstairs, away from witnesses and escalation. But something told you this wasn't going to be that simple. Trouble had a way of spreading fast in public spaces like this, so removing it was always a priority. For a second, Sarah's tactics seemed to work. The scarred man cracked a grin and began to stand. But then his eyes landed on Emily, who was doing her best to appear invisible near the piano. Wait, he said, dropping back into his seat. I want that one. The new one. Emily froze. Her eyes snapped to yours, wide and uncertain. You stepped forward without missing a beat, placing yourself between her and his line of sight. I'm afraid Miss Emily isn't available at the moment, you said calmly, with steel beneath your voice. She's already promised to another customer, one who stepped out for just a moment. But Sarah here is one of our most popular ladies. You'd be lucky to have her company. His eyes narrowed, and his hand slid toward the gun at his hip. I said I want that one. The room changed instantly. Regulars edged toward the exits. The piano player stopped mid-note. Behind the bar, Thomas moved, his hand slipping beneath the counter, where you knew a shotgun waited. These were the moments that tested a madam's authority. How you handled men like this determined whether your house was seen as orderly and respectable or vulnerable. Maddie Silks had tossed out drunks herself, gun drawn. Jenny Rogers kept hired muscle to handle problems before they started. You didn't have a bouncer, but you had Thomas. And you had your name, built over years on the principle that no girl under your roof would be mistreated, no matter what a man paid. Sir, you said, voice unwavering. In my establishment, the ladies choose their clients as much as the clients choose them. If that's unacceptable, there are other places in town that might better suit your preferences. He stood slowly, hand still hovering near the pistol. His companions followed, forming a loose arc behind him. Are you refusing to serve us? He asked, low and sharp. I'm suggesting, you replied evenly, despite the tight coil of fear in your gut, that your approach might find a more receptive audience elsewhere. The broken spoke, at the edge of town, might be more your style. It was a gamble, pointing them toward the lowest-end crib house in town. They might take the bait and leave, or they might decide to turn this into a scene. The room held its breath. Somewhere behind you, the clock ticked. Floorboards creaked as someone shifted their weight. Your pulse throbbed in your ears. Then, finally, the man laughed, a sound like cracked ice. Fine, he said, tossing a few coins on the table. Keep your fancy, girls. Let's find someplace friendlier. One by one, they filed out. With them went the tension that had gripped the room. You felt it leave your shoulders in a long, invisible exhale. Thomas moved his hand away from the bar's underside, where the shotgun remained hidden. Thank you, Emily whispered from behind you. You turned to her. She was pale, but steady. Part of the job, you said with a shrug that covered the adrenaline still pulsing through you. We take care of our own here. And it was true. Even in a competitive world where madams sometimes made hard choices about who stayed and who left, the best houses ran like communities. Girls helped one another. They shared supplies, celebrated birthdays, mourned when someone left, or worse. Maddie Silks had nursed sick girls back to health rather than replace them. Jenny Rogers loaned money to women trying to start businesses outside the trade. Fanny Porter, a Texas madam, kept in touch with former employees, helping them find husbands or safer lives long after they'd left the brothel. In a world with so few protections, women like you created your own. The rest of the night passed without further incident. The scarred man and his crew didn't return. Slowly, regulars trickled back as word spread that the trouble had moved on. The piano resumed its tunes, the whiskey flowed again, and business carried forward. By the time you locked the door around 2 in the morning, you were running on fumes. The confrontation had taken what was left of your energy. Your feet ached from those unforgiving boots. Your spine ached from standing tall for hours. Even your cheeks felt tired from holding the composed expression of Madame Catherine. You waved Thomas off, insisting you could handle the final lockup. The girls were all in their rooms now, some alone, some with men who'd paid for the full night. The saloon had gone quiet, save for the occasional creak of wood settling with the cool. As you walked your final rounds, checking the doors, extinguishing the last lamps, you found Emily sitting at the bar, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of her. "Long day," you remarked, sliding onto the stool beside her. She nodded, her eyes still on the amber liquid. "Is it always like this?" "Like what?" She made a vague motion. "That. Intense. That man tonight. The way you handled it." You considered your answer. She deserved the truth, but not a reason to quit. "Not every day," you said honestly, "but often enough that you learned to expect it." She sipped the whiskey, grimaced. "I thought I understood what I was stepping into, but I didn't. Not really." "Few do," you said softly. "It's not an easy life." "What's the good part?" she asked, eyes lifting to yours. You thought for a moment before answering. "Independence. More money than most women will ever see. And a kind of freedom no respectable woman has. And," you allowed yourself a faint smile, "the friendships. The women here, they become family." Emily nodded, slowly absorbing that. "I think I'd like that. A family. Then get some rest," you told her, patting her hand. "Tomorrow will be easier." As she walked upstairs, you moved through the last of your closing rituals. Locked away the cash. Wiped the bar. Draped the piano to keep off the dust. Then, finally, you climbed to your own room. Your body ached with every motion. You changed slowly, removing the green velvet gown and hanging it neatly. The pearl earrings went back into the small jewelry box. You unpinned your hair, letting the gray-streaked strands fall freely down your back. In your nightgown, barefaced and without the mask of rouge or powder, the years were clear, etched in the fine lines at the corners of your mouth and eyes, carved by late nights, cigarette smoke, and keeping order in a world built to resist you. You lowered yourself into your narrow bed, feeling every familiar lump in the mattress, every groove worn by years of restless sleep. Outside, the town hummed faintly with the last whispers of the night, a dog barking in the distance, a voice calling from across the street, the faint rustle of cottonwood trees shifting in the breeze. Your thoughts drifted, carried by fatigue and memory. Emily's first real night. The man with the scar. The scarred man. The death of Lily's killer. So much had unfolded in this small, self-contained world you'd carved out. A mirror of the greater frontier, with all its danger and fleeting opportunity. Your breathing slowed as you sank deeper into the mattress, the tension of responsibility slowly unraveling from your shoulders. Muscles sore from vigilance softened. A yawn slipped past your lips, and your body recognized. Finally, it was time to rest. Morning arrived not with sunlight, but with the sharp, persistent rhythm of hammering from somewhere down the street. You groaned, rolling over to bury your face in the flat pillow. It didn't help. The pounding continued, steady, unrelenting. Eventually, you gave up on sleep, pushing yourself into a sitting position. Your body ached in all the familiar ways. Feet still sore from hours in unforgiving boots. Back stiff from the strain of perfect posture. Head foggy from the small amount of whiskey you'd sipped while working the room. The hammering went on. Probably the new storefront going up where the old mercantile had burned to the ground last month. They called it progress. To you, it was just more noise in a town that never truly rested. You moved through your morning routine on autopilot. Cold water splashed onto your face, teeth cleaned with baking soda, hair brushed and pinned back into place. You slipped into your plain day dress. No corset, no cosmetics. Those layers belonged to the evening. Downstairs, Thomas was already working, restocking bottles from the cellar. The girls hadn't appeared yet, still asleep after the night's work. Even Lucy, usually the first to rise, hadn't stirred. "Morning," Thomas greeted in his usual quiet tone. "Coffee. Hot on the stove." You poured a cup and took that first grounding sip. "Any word from our whiskey supplier?" "Tomorrow's stage," he confirmed. "Paid extra for speed." You nodded. Running out of whiskey would be a disaster. Customers came for many reasons, but alcohol was always high on the list. "Any trouble after I turned in?" you asked, taking another sip. Thomas shook his head. "Quiet night. That fellow who wanted Emily never came back." A wave of relief passed over you. You'd half expected the man to return angrier, drunker, more determined. The fact that he moved on was a small mercy. You were reviewing yesterday's accounts when the front door creaked open. Too early for customers, and your girls always use the back entrance in daylight. You looked up. Sheriff Mills stepped inside, removing his hat as his eyes adjusted to the dim saloon light. His face was unreadable, but his posture, rigid and coiled, put you on immediate alert. "Catherine," he greeted. "Need a word." You gestured toward the chair across from your desk. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" He sat, resting his hat on his knee. "Had some trouble last night. Over at the Broken Spoke." Your gut clenched. The very place you'd sent the scarred man and his crew. "What kind of trouble?" "Man dead. Stabbed." He locked eyes with you. Scar on his jaw. Despite how little you liked him, the news chilled you. "I'm sorry to hear that," you said quietly. "I'm sure you are," Mills replied, voice neutral. "Word is you sent him over there." Turned him away. His tone wasn't accusatory, just factual, but still, you felt your defenses rise. They were looking for trouble. One of them had his eye on a girl who wasn't interested. I simply pointed them to another place where they might be better received. Mills nodded. "That's what I figured. You're not in any trouble. Just trying to trace his steps." "Do you know who killed him?" "One of Bessie's girls. Says it was self-defense. Said he got rough. Wouldn't take no for an answer." Bessie's place, the Broken Spoke, ran on minimal rules and even less care. Her girls were often women with nowhere else to go, older, desperate, addicted. "Will there be a trial?" Mills shrugged. "Doubt it. No one's mourning the loss. Bessie's already paid the fine for disturbing the peace." That was how justice often looked out here. If a man with no connections died violently at the hands of a prostitute, the consequences rarely extended beyond a fee and some paperwork. "Anything else you need?" you asked, eager to move past the conversation. Being even indirectly tied to a death was bad for business. "Just wanted to keep you informed." Mills stood, replacing his hat. "And to say, you might think twice before sending trouble down the road. Sometimes it's safer to handle it in your own parlor." The remark stung. You said nothing, merely nodded. "I'll keep that in mind." When he left, you sat in stillness, processing the events. The scarred man was dead, killed after turning violent, just as he might have here. It could have been Emily, or Sarah, or any of your girls. This line of work came with constant danger, not only from disease or society's judgment, but from the very men who paid for companionship. Some felt entitled to more than they bought. Some resented having to pay at all. Some just liked to hurt. Madams like Maddie Silks and Jenny Rogers hired men to protect their girls. Others, like Kat Thompson of Virginia City, took matters into their own hands. Thompson once beat one of her own girls and threw her from the house during a dispute. When taken to court, she was acquitted. The law rarely took a prostitute's side, even against another woman in the trade. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, breaking your thoughts. Lucy appeared, already dressed for the day in a modest brown skirt and cream blouse, her hair neatly braided. "Morning," she greeted, then paused, noting your expression. "Something wrong." You gave her the news. She listened silently, her face growing more solemn with every detail. "Should we tell the girls?" she asked when you'd finished. "Yes," you said after a moment, "but one at a time. No reason to cause a panic. Just enough so they're alert. His friends might come looking." Lucy nodded. She understood how to walk the line between caution and calm. "I'll start breakfast," she said, heading toward the kitchen. "They'll be hungry when they get up." The morning stretched out slowly. Girls emerged from their rooms one by one, each carrying the marks of the night before. Some looked refreshed, others weary, disheveled from difficult clients. You and Lucy each took time to speak to them privately. Quiet words, measured tones. They needed to know. They needed to feel safe. And they needed to keep working. The incident at the Broken Spoke lingers in your mind as you address each of your girls one by one, delivering the warning with care, emphasizing the need for caution while deliberately avoiding the more disturbing details. When Emily appears, one of the last to emerge, her dress wrinkled and her hair half loosened from its pins, she looks younger under the harsh clarity of daylight, fragile in a way she hadn't the night before. You pull her gently aside and explain what happened. Her face goes pale, her voice barely a whisper. "That man died because of me?" "No," you say with firm resolve. "He died because he was violent with a woman who defended herself. His choices led to his death, not yours, not mine." She doesn't look entirely convinced, but she nods anyway. "Will there be trouble for us?" "Possibly," you admit. "The sheriff doesn't expect much. They were just passing through, but we'll be watchful for the next few days. Just in case." The straightforward way you speak of potential violence might strike outsiders as cold, but it's the only practical approach in your world. Frontier brothels didn't survive on politeness. They endured by facing threats head-on, preparing rather than pretending. As noon approaches, you send Thomas to the general store with a list of supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, lamp oil, and the other small essentials that keep your establishment running smoothly. With him gone, you take over bar duty, wiping down the already gleaming counter and arranging glasses for the evening's business. Lucy manages the cleaning of the saloon itself, sweeping the floor, scrubbing the spittoons, wiping tables, straightening chairs. The girls not involved in those chores are upstairs, laundering clothes, repairing frayed seams, or simply resting in preparation for another long night ahead. This is the rhythm of brothel life, the nighttime whirl of drinks and transactions, followed by mornings of recovery and afternoons of quiet preparation. It repeats day after day, with only Sunday offering the illusion of variation when you open a bit later, out of a nod to propriety rather than any true religious observance. Around 2 in the afternoon, a knock sounds at the door. You tense, a flicker of yesterday's anxiety rising. But when you open it, you're met with a young boy, dusty from the road and holding out a letter. "Delivery for Madame Catherine," he says, extending the folded paper. "Lady at Madame Rosalie's said it was urgent." You thank him with a penny and close the door before opening the letter. The paper is crisp, fine quality. The script unmistakably Rosalie's, elegant and slanted with purpose. The note is short, but it tightens your chest. One of the scarred man's companions was spotted in town earlier that morning, asking about the fancy house with the uppity madam. Rosalie thought you should be warned. You fold the paper slowly and tuck it into your pocket. You weigh your options. You could close for the evening, claim illness or a private event, but that would mean a night of lost earnings for you and your girls. You could hire extra security, but reliable men were expensive and often brought more trouble than they solved. In the end, you settle on a middle course. The saloon will open as usual, but Thomas will stand watch near the door with strict instructions to turn away anyone remotely tied to last night's trouble. You'll also speak to Sheriff Mills again, just in case the threat becomes more direct. You've barely made your decision when raised voices erupt from upstairs. A thud, then the sharp crash of glass. You rush up the narrow staircase and find Rose and Jenny face to face in the hallway outside their rooms. Rose's cheek is red, already blooming into a bruise. Jenny's chest heaves with breath, her fists still clenched. "What's going on?" you demand. They begin shouting over one another. Accusations fly: stolen jewelry, borrowed clothes returned damaged, customers lured away by undercutting prices. It's the same pattern you've seen before. Women living in tight quarters, working in close competition, driven by pride, desperation, and survival. "Enough," you bark. "Rose, go downstairs. Let Lucy look at that cheek." "Jenny, in your room. Now." They obey, still glaring as they part. You follow Jenny into her small, sparsely decorated room and shut the door behind you. "Explain," you say simply. The story pours out, a torrent of complaints and counterattacks. Rose has been poaching her regulars, offering them cheaper deals. She borrowed Jenny's hair ribbon and returned it torn. She's been spreading ugly rumors, whispers about syphilis, to damage Jenny's standing. Some of it may be true. Some of it surely isn't. But the truth is secondary to the fact that the peace of your establishment is being threatened. "I don't care who started it," you say when Jenny finally runs out of steam. "I won't have fighting under my roof. It's bad for morale, and it's bad for business. You and Rose will make peace, or one of you will be looking for another place to work." "Understood." Jenny nods reluctantly. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now clean up that broken glass before someone steps on it." As you leave her room, you suppress a sigh. These kinds of skirmishes are among the hardest parts of your role. Your girls come from hardship. They live under stress, competing constantly, and frictions are inevitable. The successful madams, Maddie Silks, Jenny Rogers, had systems to keep things from spiraling. They assigned rooms based on earnings. They mediated conflicts swiftly and firmly. Most importantly, they laid down rules about customer ownership. Once a man became a regular, he was off limits to the others. The rest of the afternoon passes in quiet industry. You check the liquor inventory, calculating how long your current supply will last. You mend a tear in the green velvet gown from the other night. You write in your private journal, a habit you've maintained for years, coded notations only you can decipher, capturing the quiet truths behind each day. As evening approaches, the air inside the saloon begins to change. The quiet rhythms of the day fade, replaced by the flutter of fabric and the clink of glass. The girls transform. Gone are the plain dresses and sleepy faces. Now they don silk gowns in vivid colors, cinch corsets until their waists narrow dramatically, style their hair into soft, sweeping shapes. Powder and rouge mask fatigue, kohl lines eyes with mystery. You change too, into your gown of deep blue satin, your favorite for nights when image matters. It highlights your eyes and softens the gray in your hair. A string of glittering glass beads rests at your throat, not real, but convincing enough in lamplight. Thomas returns from his errands and confirms your message was delivered. The sheriff promised a deputy would patrol nearby tonight, but stopped short of any guarantees. "We'll manage," you tell him quietly. "Just keep your shotgun loaded and within reach." By 7 o'clock, the saloon is ready. The lamps are lit, casting a warm golden glow that hides wear and age behind soft shadows. The piano player has arrived and is warming up, the first notes floating through the air like an invitation. Your girls take their places around the room, ready once more to entertain, to endure, to survive. The bar hums with low anticipation. A few girls take up positions, some standing near the tables, others perched on stools, and one leans casually against the piano, the picture of effortless confidence. Soon, the first customers trickle in. Miners fresh off the day's shift, merchants who've locked up their stores, and a few cowboys just passing through, men with dust on their boots and longing in their eyes. It's the usual cocktail of the frontier's wandering souls, all seeking something, a drink, a warm smile, a song, or maybe something far more intimate. You move easily through the saloon, offering greetings to familiar faces, exchanging pleasantries with the newcomers, checking to ensure glasses are filled and the girls are doing what they do best, entertaining with charm, wit, and just the right amount of mystery. This outward-facing role of the madam is no less critical than the behind-the-scenes management. You are the image of the Silver Star, its ambassador and architect, setting the tone by your presence alone. Jenny Rogers used to make grand entrances at her house of mirrors, gliding down staircases in extravagant gowns that whispered wealth and authority. Maddie Silks, by contrast, favored directness, mingling easily with her guests, joining their card games, sipping whiskey like one of the boys, never letting anyone forget who was really in charge. Your style falls somewhere between those two legends, warm but reserved, friendly yet always a touch out of reach. You accept drinks when offered, laugh at their jokes, but you never let your mask slip. You carry yourself with a grace that demands both respect and caution. As the night unfolds, your attention never wavers from the saloon's entrance. Each creak of the door heightens your alertness. You haven't seen any sign of the scarred man's companions, but you feel their presence like a storm on the horizon. Thomas, too, seems restless, hovering closer to the front than usual, always within arm's reach of the shotgun hidden under the bar. Emily has recovered well from the prior night's tension. She's seated beside a silver-haired banker who's long been a regular, gentle, courteous, and generous. It's a perfect pairing for her second evening in this line of work. You make a mental note to compliment Lucy later. Her instincts for matching girls with clients remain uncanny. By 9 o'clock, the saloon is in full swing. The piano player has shifted into a spirited rhythm, playing popular dance tunes that send laughter and boots echoing off the floorboards. Couples circle the narrow space that passes for a dance floor. The air is thick with the heady scent of tobacco, perfume, sweat, and excitement. Laughter rings out, voices rising in jubilant competition, and for a moment you begin to believe perhaps the worst is past. That illusion shatters when the front door bursts open, the hinges groaning as it slams into the wall with enough force to jar the entire room. Conversation dies instantly. Music halts mid-note. All eyes turn toward the entrance, where three men stand silhouetted in the doorway, trail-worn, dusty, and grim. Their eyes are hard, their stance is tense, hands hovering near the weapons at their hips. You recognize them immediately. These are the men who rode with Jed, the scarred man from the night before. They scan the room slowly, their gaze finally locking onto yours where you stand near the bar. A hush spreads through the room like a cold wind. Patrons begin to edge away, clearing a line between you and the newcomers. Thomas inches his hand below the counter, fingers resting near the shotgun, but you shake your head slightly. A shootout here, now, would be a disaster. "Gentlemen," you say, your voice calm and steady despite the tension coiling in your chest. "What can we offer you this evening?" The leader, an older man with a beard streaked with gray and eyes like winter, steps forward. "You the one who sent Jed to that other place last night?" he asks. No sense in denying it, you answer, standing your ground. I suggested he might find a more agreeable atmosphere elsewhere. He's dead, the man says flatly. Knife to the ribs. So I heard, you respond, maintaining your composed tone through sheer will. A tragedy, surely. It happened because you wouldn't serve him, he says, taking another step closer. You see where this is headed. He wants to lay Jed's death at your feet, as though your decision to protect your girls somehow pulled the blade. It happened, you correct gently, because he made choices that led to violence. My decision to prioritize the safety of my employees wasn't what killed him. The man's mouth tightens. One of his companions mutters something low, his hand twitching toward the revolver at his side. You catch the shift in the room's energy. The few remaining customers begin slipping toward exits. The girls, now huddled together near the piano, look pale and frightened. This moment is crucial. How you handle it will define not just tonight, but your standing in town going forward. You think of Maddie Silks again, how she faced down a drunk with nothing but a derringer and a glare. Of Jenny Rogers and her unshakable presence. Kat Thompson, too, who didn't hesitate to defend her turf, no matter the cost. Slowly, you move your hand to the pocket where your own small pistol rests. I can see you're upset, you say softly but firmly. Let me buy you and your men a drink. We can talk, man to woman, without further misunderstanding. It's a gamble. The offer could ease the situation or be seen as weakness. The man's eyes flick to your pocket, then to Thomas, then to the saloon, now half empty and still as a grave. Just as he opens his mouth, the back door swings open with a bang. Sheriff Mills enters, 2 deputies flanking him. His hand rests casually on his holstered revolver. Evening, gentlemen, he says. His tone is polite, but there's steel beneath the drawl. Heard there might be trouble. The bearded man straightens, caught off guard. No trouble, Sheriff. Just talking with the lady here. Good, Mills replies, stepping forward to stand beside you. Because this town's had its share of excitement lately. We're not looking to add to it. The message is clear. The sheriff isn't here for pleasantries. He's staking a line in the dust. After a long pause, the leader nods. We'll be leaving town tomorrow. Just wanted to pay respects to the woman who sent our friend to his death. And now you have, the sheriff answers, his eyes unblinking. Anything else? Another beat. Then the men slowly retreat, backing toward the door, never taking their eyes off the sheriff or his deputies. When they vanish into the darkness, the entire saloon exhales. Thank you, you say, your voice quiet with genuine relief. Perfect timing. Mills shrugs. Figured they might show up. Thought I'd lend a hand. He scans the room. Might be wise to close up early. Let things cool off. You nod, already weighing the financial loss against the risk of staying open. The math is clear. I think you're right. After the lawmen depart, you begin the slow process of shutting things down. Thomas bolts the doors and snuffs the lamps. The girls, still shaken, clean up in silence. By midnight, everything is locked, white and dim. You instruct everyone to remain inside until morning, just in case the men linger somewhere in the shadows beyond. The sheriff's warning still echoes in your thoughts as you help prepare the saloon for a night of uneasy rest. It won't be comfortable, but it will be safer than letting anyone leave. You move methodically, spreading blankets across tables and benches, transforming the saloon's familiar chaos into something resembling a makeshift dormitory. As you adjust a blanket on the bar, Emily approaches quietly. Is this normal? She asks, her voice barely above a whisper. This kind of danger? You pause, considering how best to respond without softening the truth. Not every day, you say after a beat, but it's not exactly rare either. You meet her eyes. This line of work draws all sorts of men. Some are decent, just looking for a little company. Others bring their darkness with them. Emily nods slowly, unsure. I thought, she trails off. Honestly, I don't know what I thought. But not this. Most don't, you answer gently, echoing the words you spoke just last night. But it gets easier. You learn how to read people, to see trouble coming before it walks through the door. And remember, you're not alone. We watch each other's backs here. That, more than anything else, was the unspoken rule in brothels like yours, solidarity born not from sentiment but from survival. These women, cast out or disregarded by respectable society, forged something real in the shared trenches of a hard life. They shared meals, guarded secrets, comforted each other through sickness and heartbreak. For many, it was the first true sense of belonging they'd ever known. As night deepens, the saloon slips into an uncanny quiet. The girls have nestled into their improvised beds, some curled on tabletops, others stretched along the benches or bundled against the wall. Their breaths grow slow and rhythmic, a soft chorus of sleep that settles like fog across the room. Thomas remains vigilant at his post by the front door, a rifle balanced carefully across his lap. At your desk, you try to refocus on your ledger, but the numbers dance and blur. Your mind can't stop turning over the night's events, what happened, and what could have happened. You imagine alternate versions of that confrontation, ones where the sheriff hadn't arrived in time. The lamp at your elbow casts flickering shadows along the walls, pooling darkness in the corners between golden islands of light. Outside, the town has gone completely still. Even the dogs, usually barking at every drifting wind or late passerby, have gone silent. You exhale and lean back in your chair, your shoulders beginning to release the knot of tension they've held since dusk. Your breath slows, finding the rhythm of the night's hush. The fear that had gripped your gut like a fist now begins to soften. For the first time since sundown, you let yourself feel safe. Your eyes grow heavy as the adrenaline drains from your body. Shifting in your chair, you find a slightly better position, enough to ease the ache in your back. Around you, the subtle sounds of your girls sleeping become a kind of lullaby. You let your thoughts drift like leaves on a gentle stream. You think, just for a moment, to close your eyes, just a brief rest while the night stays quiet. You adjust once more, letting your head tilt and your arms relax as the soft wind outside rustles the cottonwood trees, soothing in its whisper. And with that, you sleep. When you jolt awake, it's with a stiff neck and a dull ache that runs down your spine. The gray light of early morning seeps through the windows, casting long slants across the floorboards. For a disoriented moment, you don't remember where you are. Then the memories crash in: the confrontation, the sheriff's warning, the decision to keep everyone inside. You glance across the room. Thomas is still at his station, slumped forward, the rifle steady on his knees despite his chin resting on his chest. The girls are scattered across the saloon, most still asleep, some curled on floor pallets, others hunched over tables with coats used as pillows. You stretch slowly, wincing at the stiffness in your back and shoulders. Too old to sleep in a chair, you think wryly. Then again, you've become too old for a lot of things in this line of work. Rising quietly, you tiptoe into the kitchen behind the bar. The stove is cold, but you find half a pot of coffee from the day before. It's strong and bitter, but it's hot enough to clear some of the fog in your mind. You cup it in both hands and return to the main room. Gently, you wake Thomas. He starts with a jolt, gripping the rifle tight until he sees it's only you. "Easy," you murmur. "It's just me." He nods groggily, rolling his neck. "Morning. Any trouble?" "Not that I saw. I fell asleep at the desk." You glance toward the bolted front door. "Think they've moved on?" Thomas moves to peek through the curtain. Looks quiet. Just folks headed to work. You consider your next steps. The saloon can't stay shuttered forever, and the girls can't stay hidden indefinitely. Eventually, you'll have to resume business and face whatever risks come with it. We'll wait for the sheriff to make his rounds, you decide. If he says things are clear, we open tonight. Thomas nods and sets to lighting the stove. The soft clatter and scrape of activity rouses the others. The women stretch and rise slowly, rubbing stiff shoulders and complaining about sore hips and cold floors. The piano player, who also stayed the night, stirs and begins picking out a soft tune, his fingers still remembering music even before his brain fully catches up. Lucy is already moving through the kitchen, slicing the last of the bread, laying out a few pieces of cheese, pouring coffee. The mood in the room is quiet, low, but not shaken. These women have weathered worse than this. Emily sits a little apart from the group, cradling her cup, staring into the dark liquid with a contemplative gaze. You cross the room and sit opposite her. "Quite an introduction," you say gently. 2 days in, and already a standoff. She smiles faintly, not quite humor. "It's not what I expected. That's for sure." She pauses, then looks up. "But I'm still here." There's steel in her voice that wasn't there yesterday, and you approve. She's got more grit than her delicate face suggests. "Good," you reply. "This life's not for everyone. But for the right woman, there are worse ways to earn a living." And it's the truth. For all the hardship, the dangers, the stigma, this business offers something most women in this era will never know: independence. While respectable women break their backs for pennies doing laundry or cleaning, a girl in a decent house like yours could earn $5 or $10 a night. And for madams like Maddie Silks or Jenny Rogers, it wasn't just survival, it was success. They owned property, built empires, at a time when most women couldn't even open a bank account without a man's signature. Late in the morning, there's a knock at the back door. You and Thomas share a glance. He moves to open it and admits Sheriff Mills, who nods politely and steps inside. You quickly gather the girls, ushering them into the main room to hear what news he brings. The sheriff's face is calm but alert. He clears his throat. "You're troublemakers," he says, boarded the stagecoach headed west at first light. The eastbound stage departed at dawn, Sheriff Mills announced without preamble. The station master had confirmed it. They were gone. A collective sigh of relief drifted through the room like a passing wind. The immediate threat, at least, had receded into the distance. "Any chance they'll come back?" you ask, though your posture remains cautious, your instincts unwilling to fully relax. Mills gives a shrug, casual but grounded. "Possible, but not likely. Men like that don't usually linger. They stir up trouble and move on. By the time they reach the next town, they'll have other chaos to create." You nod, absorbing his words, trusting the logic even if your nerves still hum. "Thank you for checking, Sheriff. And for showing up when you did last night." Mills touches the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "Just doing my job, ma'am." His gaze sweeps slowly around the room, noting the hastily assembled sleeping arrangements, the scattered blankets on tables, the exhausted, disheveled women, their strength worn down by fear and fatigue. "I'd recommend letting everyone get some proper rest today. Won't do your business any good if the ladies are falling asleep on customers come sundown." After the sheriff exits, you turn to the group and announce that the saloon will reopen as usual that evening, but that today is for rest and recovery. No chores, no expectations, just time to breathe. The girls slip away to their rooms, their steps heavy with exhaustion but a touch lighter with the knowledge that they are, for now, safe. You head to your own quarters as well, shedding yesterday's clothes and sinking into your narrow bed. The familiar shape of the mattress cradles your weary body, and within moments sleep wraps around you, deep, uninterrupted, dreamless. When you wake in the late afternoon, there's a quiet steadiness in your chest. The dread of the previous night has ebbed, replaced by that well-worn rhythm of practical focus. You clean yourself thoroughly, appreciating the rare luxury of warm water heated on the stove. The heat draws the stiffness from your joints and flushes away the weight of yesterday. You dress with care, choosing a gown of deep purple silk, one of your finest, its richness a silent signal of order restored. As you smooth the fabric over your hips, your mind revisits the events of the past few days. The danger may have passed, but its shadow remains. It serves as a stark reminder of how fragile your position truly is in this frontier town. For all your sharp instincts, for all the money you've quietly saved and invested, you're still a woman running a brothel in a man's world, still vulnerable to the tides of public sentiment, to shifting alliances and sudden raids. Last night, the sheriff was your protector. Tomorrow, he could be your accuser. It's a knife's edge every madam walks. Even the most successful among them never lose sight of that edge. They operate in the gray space between acceptance and condemnation, always one scandal or sermon away from ruin. Maddie Silks bought school clothes for Denver's poorest children. Jenny Rogers helped fund public works. Even Squirrel-Tooth Alice, whose missing teeth made her a local legend, gave regular donations to her church, though they never let her through the front doors. As you pin up your hair and slip on a string of glass beads, your thoughts wander to the future. How long can you keep this up? What comes next? The truth is, most madams don't get graceful exits. Some vanish into illness, into alcohol, into oblivion. Others fade from memory, their youth lost to time, their stories left untold. Maddie Silks was one of the rare few, married a cattleman and lived in quiet comfort. Jenny Rogers wasn't so lucky. Her later years were plagued by sickness and struggle before death claimed her in 1909. You wonder, could you carve out something different? You've been careful, invested wisely, avoided the bottle, kept your books tight. Maybe, just maybe, when the time comes, there could be a small house waiting somewhere far from here. A place where your name means nothing, where the past is nobody's business. A garden, perhaps. Books to read in the afternoon sun. Simple things. Peaceful things. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, there's still a business to run. Downstairs, the saloon is stirring back to life. Thomas has restocked the bar with methodical precision. The piano player is already at his keys, easing into the evening with soft scales and a familiar tune. The girls, rested and refreshed, move with a practiced ease as they prepare. The mood, surprisingly, is almost buoyant. Lucy finds you as you make your final inspection. "Everything's ready," she reports. Then, after a pause, And we've got a new girl arriving on tomorrow's afternoon stage. Bessie over at the Broken Spoke sent her. You raise a brow at that. Bessie sent her? Lucy nods. Girl asked around about safer places. After what happened with the scarred man, Bessie told her to come here. Said if she wanted protection and a steady house, this was the place. An unexpected gesture. Bessie's reputation as a madam who prioritized profit over people was well known. Perhaps last week's bloodshed had nudged her toward a moment of conscience. We'll see when she gets here, you reply. No promises until I've had a proper look at her. The evening unfolds without trouble. Your regulars trickle in, seemingly unbothered by recent events. Newcomers arrive too, lured by music, drink, and the soft suggestion of pleasure. You move through the saloon with familiar grace, welcoming, observing, adjusting. The rhythm returns, a quiet hum of routine that steadies your nerves. Emily, too, seems to have regained her composure. She moves among the patrons with growing assurance, laughing easily, gently deflecting when needed, occasionally leading a man upstairs with practiced calm. She's adapting quicker than most. Her instincts are sharp, her demeanor balanced. She understands the game, and more importantly, how to play it well. By midnight, the saloon is in full swing. The piano's tune has brightened, its chords now urging couples to dance in the cleared space near the center. Glasses clink. Laughter ripples. The familiar buzz of commerce and indulgence fills the room, almost washing away the sharpness of the week before. You sit once more at your small desk, tallying the night's intake, while keeping a subtle watch on the floor. Business is strong, better than usual for a weekday. Perhaps the tension had drawn in curious souls, or maybe your reputation for safety is beginning to spread. Either way, the numbers are comforting. That's when Lucy approaches, her expression tight. You don't need words to know something's off. Trouble? You ask quietly. She tilts her head toward the far corner. Rose is seated with a stranger, well-dressed, but wrong. The man leans in too close, his hand gripping Rose's arm just a little too firmly. Her smile remains, but it's off, strained, unnatural. A signal. You rise, smooth as ever, and make your way toward them. Each step deliberate, each movement precise. The measured grace of a woman who's seen trouble before and who knows how to meet it without flinching. The eastbound stage departed at dawn, Sheriff Mills announced without preamble. The station master had confirmed it. They were gone. A collective sigh of relief drifted through the room like a passing wind. The immediate threat, at least, had receded into the distance. Any chance they'll come back? You ask, though your posture remains cautious, your instincts unwilling to fully relax. Mills gives a shrug, casual but grounded. Possible, but not likely. Men like that don't usually linger. They stir up trouble and move on. By the time they reach the next town, they'll have other chaos to create. You nod, absorbing his words, trusting the logic even if your nerves still hum. Thank you for checking, Sheriff, and for showing up when you did last night. Mills touches the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. Just doing my job, ma'am. His gaze sweeps slowly around the room, noting the hastily assembled sleeping arrangements, the scattered blankets on tables, the exhausted, disheveled women, their strength worn down by fear and fatigue. I'd recommend letting everyone get some proper rest today. Won't do your business any good if the ladies are falling asleep on customers come sundown. After the sheriff exits, you turn to the group and announce that the saloon will reopen as usual that evening, but that today is for rest and recovery. No chores, no expectations, just time to breathe. The girls slip away to their rooms, their steps heavy with exhaustion but a touch lighter with the knowledge that they are, for now, safe. You head to your own quarters as well, shedding yesterday's clothes and sinking into your narrow bed. The familiar shape of the mattress cradles your weary body, and within moments sleep wraps around you. Deep, uninterrupted, dreamless. When you wake in the late afternoon, there's a quiet steadiness in your chest. The dread of the previous night has ebbed, replaced by that well-worn rhythm of practical focus. You clean yourself thoroughly, appreciating the rare luxury of warm water heated on the stove. The heat draws the stiffness from your joints and flushes away the weight of yesterday. You dress with care, choosing a gown of deep purple silk, one of your finest, its richness a silent signal of order restored. As you smooth the fabric over your hips, Your mind revisits the events of the past few days. The danger may have passed, but its shadow remains. It serves as a stark reminder of how fragile your position truly is in this frontier town. For all your sharp instincts, for all the money you've quietly saved and invested, you're still a woman running a brothel in a man's world, still vulnerable to the tides of public sentiment, to shifting alliances and sudden raids. Last night, the sheriff was your protector. Tomorrow, he could be your accuser. It's a knife's edge every madam walks. Even the most successful among them never lose sight of that edge. They operate in the gray space between acceptance and condemnation, always one scandal or sermon away from ruin. Maddie Silks bought school clothes for Denver's poorest children. Jenny Rogers helped fund public works. Even Squirrel Tooth Alice, whose missing teeth made her a local legend, gave regular donations to her church, though they never let her through the front doors. As you pin up your hair and slip on a string of glass beads, your thoughts wander to the future. How long can you keep this up? What comes next? The truth is, most madams don't get graceful exits. Some vanish into illness, into alcohol, into oblivion. Others fade from memory, their youth lost to time, their stories left untold. Maddie Silks was one of the rare few, married a cattleman and lived in quiet comfort. Jenny Rogers wasn't so lucky. Her later years were plagued by sickness and struggle before death claimed her in 1909. You wonder, could you carve out something different? You've been careful, invested wisely, avoided the bottle, kept your books tight. Maybe, just maybe, when the time comes, there could be a small house waiting somewhere far from here. A place where your name means nothing, where the past is nobody's business. A garden, perhaps. Books to read in the afternoon sun. Simple things. Peaceful things. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, there's still a business to run. Downstairs, the saloon is stirring back to life. Thomas has restocked the bar with methodical precision. The piano player is already at his keys, easing into the evening with soft scales and a familiar tune. The girls, rested and refreshed, move with a practiced ease as they prepare. The mood, surprisingly, is almost buoyant. Lucy finds you as you make your final inspection. Everything's ready, she reports. Then, after a pause, and we've got a new girl arriving on tomorrow's afternoon stage. Bessie over at the Broken Spoke sent her. You raise a brow at that. Bessie sent her? Lucy nods. Girl asked around about safer places. After what happened with the scarred man, Bessie told her to come here. Said if she wanted protection and a steady house, this was the place. An unexpected gesture. Bessie's reputation as a madam who prioritized profit over people was well known. Perhaps last week's bloodshed had nudged her toward a moment of conscience. We'll see when she gets here, you reply. No promises until I've had a proper look at her. The evening unfolds without trouble. Your regulars trickle in, seemingly unbothered by recent events. Newcomers arrive too, lured by music, drink, and the soft suggestion of pleasure. You move through the saloon with familiar grace, welcoming, observing, adjusting. The rhythm returns, a quiet hum of routine that steadies your nerves. Emily, too, seems to have regained her composure. She moves among the patrons with growing assurance, laughing easily, gently deflecting when needed, occasionally leading a man upstairs with practiced calm. She's adapting, quicker than most. Her instincts are sharp, her demeanor balanced. She understands the game, and more importantly, how to play it well. By midnight, the saloon is in full swing. The piano's tune has brightened, its chords now urging couples to dance in the cleared space near the center. Glasses clink. Laughter ripples. The familiar buzz of commerce and indulgence fills the room, almost washing away the sharpness of the week before. You sit once more at your small desk, tallying the night's intake, while keeping a subtle watch on the floor. Business is strong, better than usual for a weekday. Perhaps the tension had drawn in curious souls, or maybe your reputation for safety is beginning to spread. Either way, the numbers are comforting. That's when Lucy approaches, her expression tight. You don't need words to know something's off. Trouble? You ask quietly. She tilts her head toward the far corner. Rose is seated with a stranger, well-dressed, but wrong. The man leans in too close, his hand gripping Rose's arm just a little too firmly. Her smile remains, but it's off, strained, unnatural. A signal. You rise, smooth as ever, and make your way toward them. each step deliberate, each movement precise. The measured grace of a woman who's seen trouble before and who knows how to meet it without flinching. Good evening. You greet with pleasant firmness. Rose, I believe Mary needs your help with something. It's a phrase you've trained them to recognize, a coded way out when a customer becomes too much. Rose nods, prying her arm free. If you'll excuse me, sir, she says evenly. Duty calls. The man frowns and grabs for her again. I paid for your time, and you'll get it, you say evenly, stepping between them, just as soon as she tends to Mary. In the meantime, perhaps I can offer you some company. The man scowls, giving you a once-over. No offense, but I prefer something younger. You smile, unshaken. Of course, Rose will return shortly. For now, please enjoy a drink on the house. You gesture to Thomas, who pours whiskey and lingers close. It's enough to cool the man's temper. By the time he finishes, you've arranged for Jenny to slide in. More seasoned, more capable of handling rough types. Crisis averted. This is what it takes. Constant vigilance, emotional finesse, and a readiness to act. You settle once more at your desk, the quiet war of the night still humming through your bones. The saloon begins to wind down. Customers drift away, laughter dimming to murmurs, music fading. The work, never truly finished, rests for now. But you do not. The saloon fades from your awareness as your mind drifts further inward, the soft hum of the night slipping gently past your consciousness without catching hold. Your breathing settles into an unhurried rhythm, smooth and even, as if in harmony with the stillness that surrounds you. Each breath deepens your calm, and with every exhale, your limbs grow heavier, your body warmer and more anchored to the mattress beneath you. The boundary between wakefulness and sleep softens, becoming hazy, almost porous. And as you surrender fully to this sweet pull of rest, this gentle current drawing you down, a quiet wondering may momentarily surface, just a whisper of thought. You might wonder about tomorrow and all the many tomorrows that may still come. Will you remain here, in the world you've shaped with grit and care, managing your saloon, guarding your girls, growing your savings with steady hands and sleepless nights? Or will you someday choose to walk away from all of it, to pursue the life you sometimes allow yourself to imagine? A modest cottage, a quiet garden, books on every shelf, a life without judgment, without memory, without expectation. The thought flickers briefly, gentle and unanswered, before it too is swept away by the deepening tide of sleep. Your breaths are now deep and even, your body fully at rest. Every muscle slack, every worry momentarily eased. You are safe, cocooned in the hush of this moment, enveloped by the night's quiet embrace. Beyond these walls, the frontier town settles into its own uneasy slumber. The miners curled in bunkhouses, the merchants asleep above shuttered storefronts, the cowboys scattered in tents along the outskirts. Even the girls who work under your roof have retreated into their rooms, tucked into narrow beds, their dreams offering brief reprieve from the bargains and burdens of the lives they carry. And you, Madame Catherine, gatekeeper of secrets, orchestrator of longing, survivor in a world carved by men's rules, you sleep as well. Perhaps your dreams carry you to that quiet place you've imagined for so long. Or perhaps they lead you backward, through the corridors of memory, to the moments and choices that shaped the woman you've become. Whatever their path, they hold you now in their gentle sway. As the night deepens around you, unbroken and still,